Yo, hey, it's the ever infrequent Crow's Nest show.
That's
The
right.
maybe every I gotta turn my volume down on my iPad. Hashtag not professionals. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Crow's Nest sculpting extravaganza. We continue on down the path with sculpting, primarily just because I make Jason do it.
Yeah, I feel used. I thought I
so
thought being a freelancer was bad enough, but
right.
now I'm in
Right.
service to some crazy whack job painter.
We are filling a need.
Okay, all
That
right,
need.
we'll
Well,
go with
Justin
that.
said, yeah, he wanted some more sculpting stuff on the show, and we don't do really anything on the show, on the network, on the channel, whatever it's called.
Justin said
Is it?
that. He said
Yeah,
that.
he
Oh,
wanted. Yeah, he wanted sculpting. So,
okay,
and I get to
all right.
benefit from it. Yeah.
Well, I've been seeing the stuff you've been posting on Facebook. I think pretty much everybody has because you post it like 800 times a day. So
I posted one thing. I posted this.
over and over and over under six
I
different
posted
accounts.
it once. It
No, I
just got
know.
a lot of traction. It got a lot of
I know.
traction, and I was
But
very,
but then you
very,
somehow you monetized it and now it shows up as an ad. So I
yeah,
don't know how
let
you
to.
did that.
Yeah, yeah. The revenue that I've generated from this, if I could, yeah, it's pennies worth.
So that's going to look really cool when you paint it, I think.
Yeah, so I wanted to take what we've been doing with the stumps, and I'm like, okay, so the next step here is to try to make, since the intent of this was to make something to do with the base. So I painted up this little. This is a confrontation miniature, and he's not completely done yet. But I wanted to create a way big base scene, encompassing base, engulfing base for him. So
Yeah, because
um,
Reaper miniatures wouldn't have anything that would fit on that base, is what you're saying.
I already had this up and primed and ready to go,
Okay.
and I've
No,
had
no, it's fine. It's fine. I
I
get
know.
it. I get where your
Well,
loyalties lay.
that with you, if you would, if I would have, I wanted a little elf archer because I tend to like that character.
Yeah. Well, I
So
actually have
big.
an elf archer that we've been working on off
Oh,
Gene's art.
ooh, I haven't seen it.
Nope, you have not.
Why haven't I seen it?
Because we're teasing it.
You're teasing me with it.
We
Okay,
are.
so big stump. From the previous episodes, Jason has showed me how to make a stump. Um,
Can we go
I
full screen on that, Justin, for a minute? Is there a way to? There we go. I just haven't had a good look at it.
so here's the stump, and I don't know whether I like it in person more than in pictures or on screen because it
Right.
loses a lot, and maybe it's just the green stuff, and if it's painted, bring it out more. Um, the shelf mushrooms, I put a number of those on
Yes, those
around
look
here.
really good. Very
Yeah,
effective.
and some roots and vines sticking out on the side. Now this would probably make it non-castable. Um,
Yeah,
and,
it would be easy to fill if you had to cast it.
okay. Just lots of little running vines and some. And in the top, we worked on some of the standing mushrooms. I
Yep.
guess that's what I'll call them. You probably know the scientific name for them, but I have
I think
three in
standing
there.
mushrooms are just fine.
Okay. And then on the back, I have a couple more. Those shelf mushrooms, we'll call that. And yeah, and then added some little textures. Now, one of the things we talked about prior to the show was I have a little leaf here, and it's kind of hard to read. It's just one. I was struggling making leaves, and
Okay.
so that was one of my requests for today. And then I did some rocks. These are kind of the way I've done rocks forever, especially just making a green stuff base, like for a player, for a little character I'm going to play D&D with or something. They're kind
Right.
of rounded. They're kind of boring. So whatever we can do like that,
Yeah, there's a couple things. There's a couple things we could do with the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you wanted to, at this point, with that with that one, rather than trying to
Mm-hmm.
redo the rocks on that one, because I
Yeah.
don't think you need to, you could sharpen up the angles by just taking an X-Acto knife and
Uh-huh.
scraping the edges a little bit,
Oh,
rather
okay.
than having them all rounded off.
Right.
Um, you
Because
kind of
that's
have
one of
to
the things.
decide what kind of rocks you want, obviously. But if you were to scrape some, well, yeah, run across like the top, run
Okay.
across the top of the rock on the edge. There you go.
With the point or with the blade? The
With
tip?
the meat of the blade.
Okay.
Yeah, so you do that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'd flip it over and do the angle on the other side, just to kind of
Okay.
bring up those edges a little bit.
Okay. We can do that. We
Because
can work on
again, unless those rocks are from a stream bed
that.
or
Mm-hmm.
somewhere where they were deposited by a glacier, they're not going
Mm-hmm.
to be rounded off that much.
Oh, that's true. Well, maybe I could just say if there's a stream bed now.
You could, and like I
That can
said,
be.
once you paint it, you're not going to have a problem with that particular one.
No.
But let me see.
Oh, you want to see what else I did today before the show?
Sure.
So, in the spirit of the season, I have another stump that's got a kind of a howling face in it. Can you see the face? There's the
A
mouth,
little bit. What the hell?
and
Sorry,
there's
I'm
the
getting
eye.
notifications I shouldn't be getting. Okay.
Here's an eye, and there's another
Oh,
eye.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and there's the mouth. Yeah,
Very good. You're enjoying this.
I am. I like it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I have a end project in mind that I'm not ready to discuss yet. But I do.
Okay.
There's a there is a final exam. Let's call it a final exam project that I'm going to do when we get everything done. All the little techniques. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. That makes all the sense in the world.
Are you going through your tools?
I was,
Uh huh.
but as we talked about, I had them packed up for my little vacation. So now they're not all laid out like I'm used to having them. But I've got them now.
Kathy Wapple's on. Listening to Paint Dry's on. Zuniga's on. Trash is on. Cranky Dog. Easy
Okay.
Lobo. Bob and Julie were on. I saw earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks all for tuning in. I saw. If your name is scrolled away from my screen, somebody else. Oh, Carrie Michael Cosby.
Okay.
That's what I was looking for. Yeah.
So,
All right. So what are we doing? Let's do some stuff.
well, I
night
was
stuff.
going to try to show some rocks here.
Okay.
How are we doing? Can you see this okay?
Yeah. I'm
All
mixing
right.
up some more green stuff.
Okay. So you basically have like flattened ovals for your rocks,
Okay.
which is legit if that's the kind of rock you want. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to add to your repertoire of rocks and textures,
Right.
you also want to be able to take the rocks and maybe sharpen the edges up a little bit in the sculpting stage. We have a lot of basalt around here, and basalt is very columnar, and I think it makes a real good looking rock style on a base. So it's almost like a crystal shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the idea there is to try to sharpen the edges a little bit and still look natural. And the way to do that is to take some tool with a flat on it. A knife works, your sculpting tool works. And just try for flat surfaces. And then we can go back and rough those up a little bit if we want to. Can you see? Go ahead and use broader strokes.
Okay.
Lay the flat of that blade right across the big part of the putty.
Mm-hmm.
This is also how you would make crystals. The other way you could make crystals also is coming close to the shape in wet putty and then letting it set a little bit and sanding it down. But you can do an awful lot of it in the green stage. Green meaning uncured. So think about, well, maybe a dice,
A what?
maybe a dice. So you're trying to make a cube or a
Mm-hmm.
polyhedral dice of some kind. And then you go back and you can continually beat down those sharp edges to another flat plane. So I don't know if you can. So you see how that's looking? Yeah, like
Oh
that.
yeah. Okay. Okay. I need a sharper. I
And
want
you
a
can
sharper
sharpen
edge.
it up even a little bit more and then take one or two of those flat surfaces. So you have
Mm-hmm.
your table on the top,
Mm-hmm.
and then go ahead and take your flat and scrape across that where those two surfaces join and make a third flat surface, and that'll add a lot of interest to your rock. And it's little stuff like that. It's sort of like in painting, it's the little stuff that really makes it believable.
Mm-hmm.
It's the stuff that you don't even really notice, but your brain sees it and reads it as being more authentic. And obviously, in your case, when you were showing the stuff that you had with the Rackham figure,
Mm-hmm.
you definitely left a flat spot for the primary figure that you're going to use. So
Right.
you never want to lose sight of the fact that your base is going to be for a figure, obviously. But all the rest of the areas you can sharpen up and just continually work them and sharpen those angles a little bit, add some faces here and there. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, there you go. What do you think about that? Does that help
I
your?
like it. Oh, very much so. These look more rocky than my other rocks.
Yeah, and you can mix it up. So again, it all is part of the story that you're telling, right? So
Hmm.
if you have alluvial deposits that were in a stream bed, like I said, a lot of times they're rounder rocks. You mix
Hmm.
them with a little sharper rocks, and then you know that there's been some time passed. Um, you have all sharper rocks, and you're probably near the top of an alpine range where there hasn't been much water flow. And don't be afraid to bring up those angles as sharp as you want, because it's always easier to go back and scrape them down if you want to give it a little worn appearance. But get that sharp angle in there now. And then
Yeah,
later
I think
on, when
most.
the rock is set up, we can always go back and we can either sharpen it or dull it. So
I
then
think we're
you can
doing better.
also, what's that?
I think we're doing better with our stuff on camera this time.
Yeah, it's like I said, I have to apologize for that. I'm not used to working at arm's length.
Yeah.
So so then you can go back in with maybe that tool that we did where you scrape down your blade a little bit, because we're not trying to cut it, but if you want to make some cracks in the rock,
Okay. Yeah.
the trick here is no matter what you do, as you're making that impression, it's going to pull the putty in and it's going to bulge it up on each side of that groove that you're making, right?
Hmm.
So that isn't really what you want, but make that crack first. Get the crack in there and then go back over and tame that bulge down a little. So make that flat again.
Hmm.
You go back and rework it, sort of like we've done with other textures. You have to go back and continually adjust as the putty's setting up.
Yeah, you're getting different results as the putty is getting harder.
Right. But that way you've already established where that crack is.
Hmm.
And now you're just trying to make the rock look more rocky around it again instead of being bulged up. And again, there's very little substitute for actually looking at these when you go for a walk in the woods or on a beach or alongside a road. Take some time and look at how cracks work in rocks and how the rock faces work. And then you can start building in the stuff that you learned about in art with balance and flow.
Yeah, look at that. I took Miko out and we went hiking,
Yeah, there
and
you
so I took,
go.
took a lot of good pictures. Those are kind of far away. Some leaves. Master Blaster. I
Yeah,
remember
that's
that
a
day.
handy rock to have.
Yeah. There's a stump. That was at Crater Lake. Stump.
Yeah,
There's Miko
very
on a
nice.
rock. Yeah. Got both, the rock and the subject matter.
Okay, so that's the just the basic rock. Now, if you want more texture to it,
Hmm.
there's a couple of different things you can do. I looked and looked in vain, but one of the best tools, which again I couldn't find, when you buy a Dremel tool,
Hmm.
it usually comes with a little box of fittings for the tool, the little shaft things that go in the
Yeah.
end of the Dremel tool, the bits.
Yeah. Yeah.
And usually there's a rotary brush that's either synthetic or hog bristle. that's in a flat one. Do you have this? It'd be good if you did.
These?
Yeah, yeah,
No.
like those. Then they also, except that they're much thinner, the ones I'm thinking about. They also
Uh,
make one that's more round, like a cup brush.
no, the other ones I just have are my drilling
Yeah, a
away
toothbrush works too.
chemicals. Yeah.
Yeah, a toothbrush works too. The idea is you want some fine, stiff bristles, and depending on your toothbrush, you can get a firm toothbrush. You can even take some of the bristles out of it and
Hmm.
mount them in an old paintbrush. But then if you use that to kind of go over your
Yeah,
rock, you
yeah.
can get a more of a texture to it. Now anything like that, any kind of brush is going to leave a texture, but it's going to have to be a miniature brush to have it work for most of our purposes. So
Yeah.
that's why I said those little Dremel brushes work. Um, Sometimes little file cleaning brushes are good with the metal.
Ooh, I got something like that. Hold on. I got some of my old airbrush cleaning brushes.
Now, if you get the putty on the brush, it's probably not going to help you with. Yeah,
No,
that
no,
those would work,
these are.
but you don't want to you may not want to mess them
Oh,
up.
no, these are old. These are old.
Okay.
I got newer ones. And then I have the pumice stone that you sent me. This
Well,
is
I'll show you some
something.
more. Yeah, the pumice stone is always good. Lava rocks are really fun. They
Uh-huh.
come in all sorts of shapes and sizes with different holes in them, and those are always good for impressioning tools. I'll show you a trick with those too here in a minute.
Okay.
But now, can you see? I don't know if you can see the texture on that.
Yeah. Jason, Justin, blow it up, Bubba. It's a little out of focus, but yeah, you got
There
some
we go.
height on your rocks. Oh, look at I like the what you did with the taller one. I'm gonna
So
try to do that.
basically, you just repeat that texture. Now, one of the things about that is I know in
Mm-hmm.
your painting techniques you use a lot of stippling.
Mm-hmm.
If you sculpt and you add the stippling, it doesn't have to be just on a rock and just about anything, then that takes full advantage of the paints like Reaper's, the super wash paints.
Look at you cross marketing.
Yeah. But that way the stipple's already built into your miniature.
Hey, don't take my stippling away from me.
No, but again, we're talking about quick techniques, right?
Yes.
We're talking about tabletop basing techniques. We're not talking about award-winning hours and hours techniques.
Sure.
This is quick and dirty. Now,
What she said.
I don't know if you have ever looked at some of the old Games Workshop Ogren that Bob Ollie did. They
Yeah.
always look like they have a 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah. Is that what this?
Okay, he did that with the same kind of brush idea.
Okay.
He'd just add that
Um,
little stipple from a little tiny Dremel brush along the jawline
mhm.
as he was sculpting, and that gave him quite a bit of a surface that later on, if you just, in those days it was dry brush and wash, and the dry brush and wash would bring that out quite well.
I found a brush. Toothbrush.
So depending on how elaborate you want to get, you can make all the rocks the same. You could make a variety of rocks in the same pile. Kind of
Hmm.
depends. you can also make these rocks in advance if you have extra green putty left over, especially this blend that we use with the Aves. If you have
Uh-huh.
extra green putty left over, make some rock shapes. Then you can always hit them with a rolling pin or a hammer and crush them up.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get some fine gravel technique that way too, kind of like the railroad ballast
Yeah, yeah.
or kitty litter.
Yum.
So there's two rocks.
That's cool.
That's an unfortunate narce there. I would probably want to go over and rework that. I didn't do that side at all. And then as the putty hardens, it's a little soft yet for mine, but you can go back in along those front edges if you want to and take a blade and chip it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wait till the putty's almost all the way hardened, it works a lot better. You can actually chip right out without worrying about deforming the putty around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the stiffness, once the putty's set up, the stiffness allows you to chip those out.
A couple people have asked about using real rocks and the texture incorporated within those rocks.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
A couple people have asked about using just real rock textures
Sure,
and like,
I've done that too. Um,
uh-huh.
the thing that you want to remember is that anything that you use as an impressioning tool is going to leave a negative impression on the putty. So what we're doing with the brush, for instance, is leaving little holes in it. As long as that's what you want, that's great. If you
Mm-hmm.
want little more bubbles in it, then you have to use like a lava rock or something that allows you to have more of an expanded look. Okay, that's great. So I'm going to take one of my rocks off here.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I'll take them both off. And while I still got a little life left in the putty,
Uh-huh.
let's let's talk for a minute about these lava rocks.
Okay. I
So
found
if you
this is
want
really
just a quick and dirty base, you just look at your lava rock and see if it's got holes that match what you want to do.
uh-huh.
So like this one has fairly large holes. So it could be a cobblestone, maybe. I mean, you can get them larger holes than that.
My putty's not sticking no more.
Yeah, well, it's starting to get a little down the road.
That's better. It this one it sticks better too.
Okay. But see, the finer grain on the lava rock, the finer
Mm-hmm.
the grain, the more it looks like dirt or even grass. And the more coarse the grain as you make those stamps, it can look like cobblestones. The trick to doing that is you get all those little bubbles, right? That's basically what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. Then you can go back in with a broad surface again,
Okay.
and you can take and just go over the top of those bubbles a little bit and flatten them down. And then you get a really nice paved effect. or dirt effect or all sorts of stuff you can do. So get some good
Hmm.
lava rocks with a variety of different textures and keep playing around with those. On larger sculptures, sometimes they work good for skin textures on certain things.
Oh yeah.
But again, don't be afraid to go back and tame those bubbles down to where they're flat. And then you still get the intersection marks, the depressions in between.
Yeah.
Now, once you do that, if you want to take that and just say, okay, that's going to be my basic texture for a floor,
Mm-hmm.
for a stone floor, then you do the texture first. And you start defining some shapes.
Ah.
But get that texture in there first.
Mm-hmm. It's in there.
And again, even though this putty is getting pretty stiff, as we scribed those lines in there, it did bubble up a little bit around the line. So I'm going to just take and roll it down a little bit to get it flat again.
Okay. Hey, we've been doing movie time lately, and I've got new movie slash TV show reviews. You want to hear
Okay.
them? What should I? Oh, Andor, or yeah, Andor.
Yeah.
Awesome. Have you watched that at all?
Yeah. It's very
Fan.
different. Very
Yes, it's
different. I
very
like it.
it's like Rogue One vibe,
Yeah.
so it's great.
A little
Love it.
more
I loved
noir.
Rogue One. Yeah, love it. Fantastic. I think I talked about Loki. I loved Loki. We did the whole Disney Plus thing for a month. And so we're not going to be able to finish Andor because our month ran out. But we'll pick it up again probably come Christmas time. But my new favorite show, and I was talking to Justin about it, is Rings of Power. Have you watched any of
Yeah.
that yet?
I
I
have.
love it. I
I
love
think
it.
it's
I
pretty
think it's
good.
great. I think it's great. I know it hasn't necessarily got the best reviews out there, but man, I love it. I think it's great. I think if you gotta go into it going, someone's gonna interpret the stories you've read, and it may not be exactly how it was written, but it's pretty darn good. I
Well, on
like
those kind of
the
things, I
cast.
tend to respond to the visuals more than most
Yeah.
other stuff. And the visuals are really good for a TV
Yeah.
show, especially.
Oh, they have spared no expense in the sets and the CG, and just really cool. Super cool.
So on the intersections of these rocks, if I can digress
Yeah.
for just a second before we get
Uh-huh.
it too hardened here, on the intersections of the rocks where the lines meet, go
Uh-huh.
back in and indent, make those just a little bit larger than the lines.
Okay.
Okay, so just go in and tap in a little bit extra space on those intersections.
Uh-huh. I watched Moon Knight. Moon Knight was great too, Mike.
Yeah, Moon Knight was fantastic.
I really liked Moon Knight. It was really good.
But if you leave a little bit extra on these holes, by the time you paint this on these
Mm-hmm.
intersections, it's going to look even more realistic.
Okay, it's a good point.
Yeah, I liked Moon Knight. That I was watching that when we were working on the Egyptian stuff
Yeah,
for our
that was
last
good. It was,
Kickstarter.
and that actor who was in the newest Star Wars movies. Didn't really dig him too much in the Star Wars movies, but I really liked him in this. I really thought he did good in this.
Yeah, he
I liked
showed
his
a lot of
character.
versatility.
He sure did. He sure did. And God, Cassian Andor is really cool. He's a good cast. Now I heard is no wait, I'm confusing him with the guy that plays the Mandalorian. Is going to be Joel and from The Last of Us. I think that's the guy. I get the two confused.
Yeah, I could see that. They have a similar space. So anyway, that's a good way to use your lava rocks for textures, all sorts of, and again, all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of textures. If you get some, just get a whole bunch, play around with them on the green putty because you'll find that you can mimic a grass texture, a dirt texture, a stone texture, all sorts of stuff. Especially if you're doing a lot of bases in a hurry for an
Mm-hmm.
army or whatever, it's very useful to do that. I haven't looked at our chat for a while. I get going.
No, we're a lot of movie, TV show talking. Mike asked, what's the purpose of mixing green stuff in epoxy sculpt?
Okay,
Jason.
um, for me, the green stuff is more flexible when you use it by itself. So because I came to putty sculpting from a background of carving rather than clay sculpting, I found it more useful for me to add the Aves putty half and half, and that makes it a stiffer putty by the time it sets up. It's not as flexible. And what that does for me is allow me to use other techniques like sanding and scraping and chipping, all sorts of weathering techniques. Um, I just prefer a stiffer putty. It's very easy to do, for instance, a sword blade with a stiffer putty blend. Some people will use a little bit of Fimo in their green putty, and once that's baked, it'll be a little stiffer. Some people like to use Milliput mixed with green putty for a stiffer thing. There used to be, I don't know if there's still brown putty around with the aluminum filling. That stuff worked really well. But for my purposes, I just go ahead and I mix up a big batch like you've seen us do of the Aves and the green and have it just ready to go. Yeah, like that. So that's the B side of the Aves with the blue and the A side of the Aves with the yellow. And they don't harden until you mix them together, the green. And it stays that way, it stays blue and yellow too.
If you mix
We
the
use
blue
the
from the
Aves we
green
use as a
stuff,
natural color.
if you mix the blue from the green stuff and the A from the Aves, would it get hard?
Yes, but not in a good way. It's not consistent and it doesn't have very much strength.
I almost made that mistake, and then I had to make up a
Yeah, the
big batch.
activator isn't the same. One's more of a polyester putty and one's more of an epoxy putty.
Uh,
Um, so the activator isn't quite the same. But if you mix them half and half on each side, then it all seems to work just fine. It also works fairly well as a material to be cast. It's a little less flexible, so if you do a lot of tiny details, your green may not survive the mold rubber as easily. But I think the trade off is being able to sharpen all the edges by scraping. So
and
again,
Mike
for
is
me,
hogging.
it's more of a production help.
Okay.
They can work much faster that way than in just plain green.
And Mike asked
And
about
plain green will
magic.
stick to it. You can go back with plain green, and you could do a skull, for instance, in the Aves plus the green, and then come back in with green and do all the detailing and all the hair, if you prefer uh, the working technique of the green putty itself.
Mike asked about the magic sculpt. Would that do the same?
Magic Sculpt is very similar to Aves. I
Hmm.
found that Aves, for me, again, this is my own experience, is a finer grain. Aves started out as a taxidermy putty. So if you're a hunter and you go and have a trophy mount made, a lot of times the softer parts of the tissue on the trophy mount are actually made out of Aves epoxy sculpt.
Oh well.
So
Tidbit.
noses and eyelids and that kind of thing.
All right. So let's do. Want to do some leaves?
Sure,
Okay, or some plants, or whatever. However you want to approach that.
sure. I'm going to mix up some more putty, I think.
Me too.
This is starting to get a little bit old. Now, here's where you really want these translucent dividers from your tackle box.
Okay.
There's a couple of reasons. Grab my. So a lot of times when someone's just starting out sculpting, the between trying to master the putty technique and the physical part of sculpting and the conceptualization of what you're trying to sculpt, it can be overwhelming.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's very helpful to you use photo reference, or you can even draw it out. And I found with leaves, it's it's especially handy. So depending on how you want your leaves to look, you just figure out your shape on paper first, and then you can take and put that clear plastic or that plastic over it. It's going to be a little bit too thick. So go ahead and draw out your leaf. If you're having trouble, this is if you're having trouble visualizing it. After
Okay.
you work in putty a while, you won't have the same trouble that you have when you're starting out. But it's certainly, like I said, there's a lot about sculpting that's kind of overwhelming when you first get into it. So you want to use whatever kind of crutch and help you can do.
Okay.
And this works for all sorts of shapes. I mean, if you wanted a shield shape, a fancy shield shape or whatever, works the
Ooh,
same
that's
thing. Draw it out
yeah.
on some paper first,
Uh huh.
and then put a little blob of putty and keep working it.
Oh, I see. I know what I did wrong. Hold on. I covered it all
Now,
up.
obviously, these are quite a bit bigger than you would have for most of the stuff that you were doing, but that's just
Yes, I.
because I wanted.
You got to go remedial first with me.
Well, it's just easier to see too, I think.
Yeah, and remedial.
So you have the shape, and then you just put a blob of putty down. and you can
Mm-hmm.
work right to the outlines of that shape that you put underneath there. And like I said, shields, it's good for shields, it's good for mechanical stuff. But that's a nice little cheat.
I like
We
that.
talked before about how if you want to do uh, the underlayment, the skeleton for wings, and you
Mm-hmm.
want a mirror image, you could draw your wing out on the paper, flatten some putty out,
Mm-hmm.
follow your outline that's on the paper, then you can turn it over, let it harden and turn it over, and then do the same thing on the other side, and you'll have a mirror image of the first thing that you started with, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Then you prop it up like this while it hardens, and then you can pull them off.
That's cool.
Now you might have to wait a little bit. This is pretty new putty, so it's gonna fight me on it. But I would let it sit, not till it's all the way hardened,
Mm-hmm.
but let it sit maybe 10 minutes. One of the ways that you can actually accelerate, well, not accelerate, you can heat it up and it accelerates the cure, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you want the putty to be stiffer without changing the cure, you can stick it in the freezer for a little while, and that'll artificially harden the putty up, and it'll retain its softness once it gets back to room temperature.
Oh.
So sometimes I would take the putty shape, go stick it in the freezer to get it to harden up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Then I could shape the leaf because we don't have time to let it sit. But you've seen in previous things how it peels up off of there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you do the leaf, you let it sit, not till it's all the way hardened, or you put it in the freezer,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can peel it up off that polyethylene plate. And because you haven't let it harden off all the way, it's still kind of sticky. So you can lift it off and then adhere it to your stump or whatever you're going to do with it. Does that make sense?
It does. All right, so I have another request. Kind of different. I would like to make leaves that are alive. So in kind of like this shape,
Okay.
and make a bunch. I want to be able to make small ones, super small ones, and be able to make a bunch of them, and then
Okay.
put them on and layer them up.
Well,
Does that make sense?
there's a couple ways to approach that. You can either take a bunch of small, roll a bunch of balls of putty the same size,
Okay.
lay them all out on your polyethylene sheet, and
Mm-hmm.
flatten them and shape them as you go,
Okay.
right? Lift them
Let's do
off
that.
and adhere them to wherever you're going.
Yeah, I was trying to do
If
that,
the
and I wasn't very successful.
if the putty gets too hard that it's not adhering,
Uh huh.
a little bit of 5-minute epoxy works great. Just a little tiny bit. So that's one way to do it. Now,
Okay.
there's another way to do it that's more of a die cutting thing. So I believe this is called the ferrule, this metal part on the end of a
Yeah.
paintbrush or a clay shaper.
Uh huh.
So on your old paintbrushes, I used to do this all the time when I'd run out, when my paintbrush was no longer any good. I'd
Hmm.
take a pair of needle nose pliers, I'd pull all the hair out of it, right?
Hmm.
So you have just a tube left over on the end of that ferrule.
Yeah.
And then you can shape the ferrule into a tear shape. Let's just call that shape that you drew a tear shape.
Okay.
So you shape that ferrule into a tube shape. And once you get it, you roll out your putty and then you can just stamp it.
Mm.
Stamp it
Show
out,
me the
right?
show me the little push the tiny ball pushing it into a shape technique.
Okay. If I was to do a lot of them, I would do the ferrule thing.
Hmm.
Um, so the trick here is to try to get them about the same size.
The leaves are different sizes.
Right, but the difference isn't going to be huge when you're talking in miniature, right?
Okay.
So you want them to be similar sizes. Let's just say similar sizes. So I have three similar sizes. That one's obviously way too big.
Okay.
But again, you're relying on the stickiness of the putty on that sheet. So the sheet's going to hold it just enough that you can shape that leaf.
So when I was doing it, I could get to this. I got this far, and then to make the teardrop, you're just using the clay shaper and making a point. Okay.
Yep, and go back and keep reshaping it, right? That's a trick to almost any of this sculpting is no operation, no phase of the operation is ever complete until the putty's hardened. So
Mm,
you go back in and you keep reshaping it because every operation you're going to do is going to affect the whole putty somehow.
okay.
So we get our basic shapes, and then depending on what you want to do, you might want to scribe in some veins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I would say you want that to be very subtle. I would not want to go back in there with a knife and actually cut those veins.
Mm-hmm.
I'd more want to impress them.
I want to impress them. I want to impress you. Get it?
Well, that's ship has sailed, pal.
Oh, all right. Wow, dude, it's already 5 o'clock. My time.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, it takes time, and unfortunately, some of the stuff we should probably do as a 2 hour extravaganza sometime because a lot of it relies on manipulating the putty through the stages of cure.
Yeah.
So now there you're using just the gray, just saves.
No, I'm using it's mixed.
Okay, it's
It's
just I
mixed.
guess it's just the angle of the light.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
you're killing me on the leaves. I'm not doing a good job on the leaves.
Well, we have to do them. One thing you might consider doing, again,
Uh-huh.
instead of letting extra putty just go to waste, if you have a
Mm-hmm.
few extra bits, make some leaves.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna have to do. I'm gonna have to practice on the leaves.
Make some
'Cause I-
flat bars that later on you can whittle sword blades out of.
yeah.
On some leaves, the central stem is raised, and on other leaves, it looks like the central stem is indented because the leaf actually goes up. around the indentation. So you have to
Oh
kind of
yeah, that's
figure
true.
out what leaf you want, what shape you want. Um, and again, you're going to you're going to want that to harden off, not quite all the way. You still want to retain a little bit of flexibility when you're
Mm-hmm.
ready to pull it off, but you don't want to have it be so flexible that you damage it when you take it off the plastic. So you can even flex the plastic a little bit and it'll pop off. But the reason you want to keep it flexible is not only does that help you to adhere it to the stem later on
Uh-huh.
or to the stump or whatever, but it also allows you to put a curl in the leaf, right?
Yeah.
So once you get it onto the stem and it's adhered, then you can go back in with your tweezers and very lightly, let's see if I can, you can very lightly, oh, I'm lagging here. Okay. So you can very lightly go back in once it adheres and use your tweezers if you want to curl up the edges of the leaf or to give it a little bit more of a character. It really depends again on what kind of leaf you're trying to imitate.
Yep. This is better. I like this. I see. I just need to work on this, but I see the potential here.
Yeah, it's nothing. I mean, it takes a while. You know, an hour. We cover a lot
Yeah.
of techniques in an hour, and it's always
No.
good to go back and figure that out, like you've done with the stumps. You must have done 800 stumps since the last time we did this.
I've done 3, 4, 7. If you count the two I showed today, I've done 9 stumps,
Yep. Now,
and
one
they're
last thing I
all
can show you
yeah.
real quick. See if I can get my putty to adhere to the thing.
Not all plastic dividers are made equally.
Nope.
This other one that I grabbed, I do not like. It does not stick very well.
Well, you might have more. You might have more of the release agent on there too.
Yeah.
But now something else you can try.
Ooh, I like that. What's that?
Well, that's just rolling out a snake
Okay.
and teasing out little bits
Uh huh.
with your modeling tweezers,
Tweezers.
your little curved tweezers.
Oh, I like they're modeling tweezers now.
Well, as opposed to your splinter tweezers or your eyebrow tweezers, or
Nose hair tweezers.
yeah. That way, you kind of keep them straight in your head so that you're not using your
Hey,
nose
Jason.
hair
Hey,
tweezers.
Justin. Justin, can you zoom in on Jason?
Yes.
Can you show the side? So from the side, how you're pulling that up. Oh,
Okay, so I just pull it one way.
yeah. Uh huh.
Now, obviously, I'm keeping these in a straight line. Ideally, this would be this would already be on your stump, for instance, as a vine,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And you would pull out not just one straight ladder like line, you'd pull them off from the side
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I like that.
So there's all sorts of ways that you can.
I like this. I like this way makes more sense to me.
Yeah, you have to find whatever technique is going to allow you to, to get to where you want to go. Obviously,
Yeah.
making individual leaves, you probably have far more control. But if
Mm-hmm.
you come up with a series of hand movements that you can use on a vine, you're going to be able to do more leaves along that vine
Yeah. And you can
quicker.
mix and match them all together too.
Yeah. And like we've been talking about, if you can just get the flat planes pulled out and reshaped, then let it
Mm-hmm.
sit for a while, you can go back and really put some not power, but you can squeeze it a little bit harder to get them to get even more refined of a shape once the putty is hardened up a little bit.
Yep.
So again, that's another time when you use the hardening property of the putty through the cycle to your benefit. So you get the basic shape laid in, your basic vine, your basic leaves. Let it sit for a little while, not all the way hardened. I always say that right before it's all the way hardened, which is something that you just develop over time. Um, and right before it's all the way hardened, you can go and tease those leaves back out. And again, if you can find these curved tweezers, this is what you want.
Yeah, these are great.
And if
Thank you
you
for.
make sure you have some release on there, you can glide, you can pull and smooth at the same time. And we didn't get to whole plants, but you can use similar techniques for whole plants.
That's next week. Stay tuned.
Yeah, I'm just
Tune back in.
fooling around here though.
Oh, I like this.
Now, one thing you can do that's very handy, and I'm sure Greg won't mind, but Wicked Elf has done those wonderful paper leaves.
Oh, the vellum.
And
Yeah.
if you want I'd order a bunch of those to get a good idea of leaf shapes. And if you want to
Oh,
sculpt them, that's certainly a nice reference to have.
totally. And you buy some more stuff from Greg.
Yes, I like the whole paper. That whole idea is so great.
Yeah, no, it is super cool.
But I also like doing, if you're trying to do something with a little bulk to it, like say
Yeah.
an aloe plant or something, you almost need to use putty so that you can get that taper in there.
Yeah, no. Ooh,
So
look at
sometimes
that.
when you're just sitting watching your rings of power,
Yeah.
you can just have a little bit of putty adhered to one of these plastic things and your tweezers, and you can just keep playing around on the commercial breaks or whatever and get an idea for how the putty hardens over time and the different techniques you can use with tweezers and tools to really bring up the realism.
All right, Justin, show my camera real quick. I want to show Jason something. Can you zoom into mine? Can you see that? My vine.
Yeah.
I like
So
this.
it's pretty cool. What you would
Yeah.
do now, before
Uh-huh.
it gets too hard, is in between the leaves, you want to pull the vine part back into a thinner vine, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So
Oh,
reshape
yeah.
the vine in between the leaves, and you'll really be happy with what you do, I think.
Yeah, totally. Oops. I was pulled it off.
The main thing with a vine, of course, is the leaves wind up looking broader than the vine itself, generally.
Yep. No, that's super cool. You could make a really old, gnarled wizard staff this way.
Yes, you could. And I'm sure several of us in the chat have. Jason, do
I
you
like
base
that.
a dwarven battle mage on ponyback yourself? Oh, on yourself because it strongly resembles you. Well, a lot of my dwarves do look like me. Um, if you actually look at different sculptors and how they sculpt faces, you can see that a lot of us do use reference from a mirror. Um, where I see it even more than in faces is in hands, because people have different shaped hands. And I very often am looking at the hands on a miniature and I can tell whose hands they are.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
But yeah, I mean, you use what you can. So Wicked Elf is saying a little green stuff, little vellum, brass etch if I'm feeling masochistic. Yes, that is the mini for this quarterly contest. I was happy to see that. That was a green putty miniature that I did right as I was
Forever
learning
ago.
how to do digital stuff, and I was very happy with the way it turned out.
Yep, here it is, right here. I actually have it I had it on my side of my desk.
Yeah,
I didn't know it
I,
was the
I
miniature of the painting contest miniature. I've never done one of those.
yeah, it's the quarterly
Yeah.
one that they do. I guess when you win the prior quarter, then you pick the miniature for the next quarter,
And you can pick any
if I'm not
miniature?
mistaken. I think it's any Reaper miniature. I'm not sure. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know the exact rules, but that seems to have been the way it's been going. Quindy put in a link to the quarterly contest and all the info. So if you were interested in doing that, I'd definitely click on that. It's always fun to go through and see all the different ways people come up with for these miniatures.
Oh, totally. No, it's fun.
So now, if you just look at that vine you're making, you can
Hmm.
kind of see how you could easily do, say, a bonsai tree, uh,
Yeah.
all those things too. And again, since we're using a putty that has uh, a blended portion that's more crisp
Hmm.
for your purposes in terms of modeling and basing, it's self armaturing, right?
Yeah,
So if
it
you made a
is.
tree, you could make just the tree out of this putty blend. I don't know that a vine made with just that would be so good for, like a tabletop miniature that you were going to use in a war game and push it around a lot. You'd
Yeah.
probably want to build it over a wire frame. But for a display miniature, this is more than enough armaturing generally to do this stuff on.
No, this is cool.
Yeah, you can really, it's got a lot of zen to it. You can just
I
keep
like.
working it and work.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some more practice with the snake leaf technique.
Yeah,
That's cool. Because then you can even like you like little sections of it. You can just cut it out
yep.
and you and apply it where you want to.
That's true,
Yeah.
and you
Cool.
can build it right onto the stump, and it gives you quite a bit of control. The one thing I
Yeah.
would say is make sure your stump is pretty much fully hardened before you
Yeah.
put a new coating of putty on it, because then you can always pull it off again, right? You can always push it
Ah, good
around on
point.
there a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
If
a good
you
point.
have the surface of the putty too wet on the stump, though, it could stick to your vine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm digging this.
Okay, listening to paint dry says it has to be under a certain dollar amount. So,
Oh,
well, that's good, I guess. That keeps it from being a contest of
yeah.
who has the most money to spend. Instead, it's who has the most time, which, as we know, time is money. So I'm not sure that how far that gets us. But
Yeah. That's a good point. Oh. Yeah, as this is getting harder, I can kind of take the ends of the leaf and kind of curl them down a little
yeah,
bit.
you can tease it out however you want. And now, if you get that too thin, you're going to have to really use a delicate brush when you go and paint it,
Yep.
obviously. But it's still pretty. It's tougher than you would think.
I've done some tests with the other stumps and really pulled it out super thin. And I think the way that we're adding the aves, man, even
Yeah,
the really when it's super thin, man, it hardens up really nicely.
it does. It does. You can pull it out till you can see light through the putty,
Yeah.
and it still stays. You can take advantage of that. For instance, for a wing membrane,
Mm-hmm.
you can get some really good technique uh, by pulling it very thin, letting it harden, and then you use more transparent or translucent colors on it, and
Mm.
you get that light that passes all the way through the wing.
Yeah, I'm digging this. This has been the favorite thing I've learned today. Good job, Jason.
Well, good.
Yeah. This is what I wanted. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, I think if I was doing bases or detailing a competition miniature, I find this kind of work much easier to do in green putty than trying to sculpt it digitally and put
Mm-hmm.
it together that way. It's just more direct. It's more free flowing. It's like looking at a sketchbook instead of a finished painting. So there, a lot of times, there's a lot more life to a green putty sculpture, especially in the basing. I think. I mean, that's a personal preference.
No, it's been a lot of fun. I've had to travel the last few weeks, and so I've been sketching stumps while I've
Yeah,
been gone and
yeah.
other things. But I've been jonesing to kind of come back to work on this, and been afraid to pack my tools because I don't want to lose them in TSA. These little metal sharp things. Not that I don't think they would take a
Well,
tweezer, but I don't ever want to risk it.
right. Well, there's some things you can do as far as that goes. You can pretty much replicate all the tools that you want. Uh, what I used to do for that is I'd get Teflon rods
Uh huh.
that were more plasticky, and I'd shape them into the same shape as my steel tools, and I'd put them in a manicure set box,
Hmm. Oh,
manicure scissors and the whole thing. And no one would ever take a second look at them, right? Because they look like manicure tools that way.
yeah. I carry on all the time, so I just got to make sure.
Yeah, well, that would, I mean,
You know,
toothpicks work, all sorts of
sure,
stuff like that works.
sure.
You can shape a toothpick pretty, get a good, most of the toothpicks you buy in a grocery store are softwood. But if
Hmm.
you look for toothpick dispenser toothpicks, they're generally made out of hardwood. And hardwood, if you shape those and then you can even use a little super glue on the end and sand them down again, you can make
Hmm.
some pretty good wooden tools that go right through airport security.
Oh,
Geez, I probably just alerted the whole
Yeah,
Homeland
you're on the
Security
TSA
ones.
watch list now.
Well, I've been on there for a while anyway.
Okay. All right. Well, it is nearly 5:30. I know. And Justin, we have not heard Little Oliver all show,
That's
which I
because
was kind of hoping we would.
his mom got home.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay.
I was gonna say you could poke him till he yelled a little bit at us,
I,
but
Yeah,
yeah,
we
he'll
were going
never
to
poke
ask you
you.
to poke him.
He'll
Yeah.
just yell.
Shake him. No, don't shake him.
Shake.
Don't do that.
He's actually down for a nap.
Oh, you down for the count?
He is down.
All right. But yeah, that was fun today. You want to do this again next week?
I like the idea.
sure.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll be around next week. I think I'm here through the rest of the month. So maybe the last week of the month I won't be able to.
Well,
Bamboo.
I'm done with my vacation now for a while, so
Okay. So yeah, we'll see everybody again next week. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I saw Bryce on. I saw Valendar, Pindrake, Easy Lobo. I'm trying to think of anybody that I missed mentioning before. If
well,
I missed,
Greg and green
yeah,
users and
yeah. So for us, never
listening to
not being
paint
on it.
dry,
Yeah,
camel
yeah,
rage.
yeah. All right. Well, next week, I don't know. Oh, I will have my final review. Oh, Corporea is on too, Aaron.
Oh, good.
We're all the way to the last two episodes of Rings of Power. So I will let you know what I think of the first season next week because
Yeah,
it's all.
I think I stopped at 3. Then we had to get ready for vacation, so I've got some catching up to do.
Yeah, it's catching up. Yeah, so let's do that. And we can talk about. We won't do any spoil. No, we won't do any spoilers. But yeah, and that's it. So thanks again for everybody for watching. Oh, we were gonna. Do we want to do the tool thing? We were gonna give away one a
Yeah,
show.
yeah. Let's do a
Sure.
hashtag free real quick, and I'll draw one.
Get your hashtag freeze in for a free Poke Tool. Totally forgot to mention it. Um, for those that are still staying on, that haven't bailed and here for the last few minutes, get your hashtag freeze in. We're going to give it a couple minutes. And I really like the snake leaf trick. That's very jungly.
Yep.
Yeah. So maybe next week, while we're waiting for some more hashtag freeze, like maybe like a freestanding kind of plant with
Okay.
leaves or whatever. Let's try something like that. And anything
Yeah.
else? Anybody has any other suggestions? Throw those out there even next week of kind of plantish, rockish, terrainish stuff. And then once we get through that, maybe we start doing like it's all kind of related to basing stuff. So maybe a ruin,
Yeah,
like a
that would be
ruin.
good. Well,
I
we kind of with that stone technique I showed you,
Yeah.
that could easily go into bricks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was thinking more of
We've got
like
that stuff.
and then we talk about making some impression castings too, so we can steal
Yes,
from other.
yeah, I've had that stuff ready. I've got my two part
Oh,
mold making kit. So
text me what that is, and I'll get some before we do it.
okay, it's just
Yeah.
Alumilite. I'll look it
Where do
up.
I get that?
Alumilite mold builder or something.
Anywhere? Do I get it like at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or
I'm
anything? Or
sure your local hobby store has it. I
okay,
would
cool.
think. If
Okay, cool.
not, maybe Amazon.
All right. All righty. I think we're ready to roll. That's enough time.
Ready for the
Yeah.
winner?
Yes. 1, 2, 3, win.
It is.
And the winner of this week's exclusive Poke Tool is Camel Rage 99. This is the Poke Tool exclusive to the show, sculpted by Julie Guthrie, and on the back lettered by Bob Rodolphe. So congratulations, Camel Rage. And yeah. So next week, more of this, more fun stuff, and there you go.
Gonna be raiding
What do
the
you think,
otters.
Justin? All right.
I think
Otters. Perfect.
always the otter.
Always the otters. The otters are awesome.
All
All right, later,
Thanks very
guys.
much.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. And tool lists. We'll talk about tools too, I guess.
Yeah, someone had a question about tool lists, so I figure rather than doing it now, we'll do it next time.
Yeah, so you got to tune in next time to hear about the tools.
Thank you, guys.
Not just the two people on the show.
The one person on the show.
Wait.
And the one at the bottom.
Just wave goodbye.
Sure.
Bye bye.
See you
Bye bye, everybody.